Fight, dang it, fight! Was playing with a heavy and an assault on lethal. We're at the generator in Inferno and the bomb has been planted. I just killed 2 elites, turn around and saw the heavy resupplying. Further away, the assault is surrounded by 6 elites and is clearly struggling at generator 3. This heavy walks 3 steps towards assault and just turns around and leaves. Runs towards the next section. I was in disbelief. Wait, okay. We're at the generator in Inferno. Killed 2 elites, turned around, saw the heavy resupplying. Further away, the assault is surrounded by 6 elites, is clearly struggling at generator 3. So is this is, I assume, after, this is like at the aftermath of the objectives there, which, yeah, you have to take over the generators. And yeah, so this is lethal. 6 elites surrounding the assault does sound pretty bad. Dude, the heavy has to notice that on the way out of that generator. That is, yeah, I mean, sheesh. Okay, let's continue. I rush in, plant the flag, and start fighting side by side with the assault. When it's all done, that bloody heavy was just spam pointing at the door for the next section. I replied, F you, and the assault and I left the game. After that, I'm still kind of mad. What kind of jerk is this really? Okay. I feel like this is an interesting situation. So there's nothing that really screams to me that they should have been rushing here. Now, I will admit, there's definitely moments where I think, just moving on with the objective is the better play. It really depends. In Lethal, I guess there is a sort of there's definitely some tension considering the way extremists can spawn in at Lethal. If you take your time, you're going to get, more extremist spawns. But the thing here with, especially with this objective point, it feels like you really do have to make sure you clear out those generators to make sure your teammates can leave that point. I feel like, the heavy had to be in that fight with the generator. Not to mention, he's going to get ammo, so I feel like he was definitely there. He probably missed the assault getting surrounded, I will say. Yeah, him just pointing at the door is kind of a jerk move. I'm not too sure you've needed to leave, though. You know what I mean? I'm not too sure it had to be, you guys did get through the situation. If he's a little bit rude in the operation, I mean, I get it. It really depends on how much that operation mean to you, I guess. But yeah, ultimately, I think there's good and bad moments to rush through the operation. This is definitely one of those bad moments where it feels like the miscommunication here either fell on the lap of the heavy, missing the assault getting surrounded, or maybe this poster took it a little bit too personal, I would say. But at the same time, I can understand the frustration. I was in disbelief. see what I mean? It's a little, it's really not that, it's really not that unbelievable to see, somebody rushing through operations, and yeah, missing their teammate getting surrounded. Honestly, that heavy needs to be more aware regardless. Because yeah, even pointing at the door to rush your teammates isn't very aware to to really be a fun player to play with. That doesn't seem like a good thing. So regardless, I understand. Yeah, the poster's not wrong. Don't take my, don't take my skepticism. Don't take it to heart. I'm just a little bit, I'm always skeptical sometimes with some of these posts. But ultimately, I don't think the guy should have left is really all that's really the only point I wanted to make. But ultimately, yeah, this is a bad moment to rush through the operation, and the heavy was kind of being a jerk here. I agree. There's a school of thought with some players that you have to get through the mission as quickly as possible to get experience faster, so on and so forth. I will say, dude, I've seen so many people rush through those loading screens at the end with the stats and everything. I've seen so many people rush through that. It's pretty much like every video I get, to be fair, nobody's sitting there and yapping over their stats, so that's understandable. I understand people are just, clicking through. They don't really care how much damage they did or whatever. But still, sometimes, sometimes it's fun to analyze the stats and see what actually happened in that operation. But that's not even really the point of this comment here. I think what they're getting at is people are farming operations essentially as fast as possible to get to power level, I guess. There's really no power leveling in this game. I feel very satisfied if I punch up in difficulties for like 1 or 2 operations, and honestly, that's really all you need to get a head start on leveling for Prestige. Like, even when I was doing Prestige 3 Bulwark, I did like 3 operations. They were like lethal, and I think there was an absolute one, and I'm pretty much already going to be able to get to Prestige 4. So that's really, just you don't really need to rush through operations. Just pick the right ones, and then you should be fine. However, I do think, speed running operations could be something fun to do, depending on the state of the game. But yeah, right now I'm still trying out a lot of stuff, but honestly, some sort of community speed run would be kind of cool. Like, I was kind of thinking about it, but I don't want to get it twisted. Don't rush through operations with randoms. My message to those of you that try to skip fights and progress quickly: you are doing yourself and everyone you play with a disservice. The thick of the fight creates the most rewarding sense of accomplishment when you and 2 other players come out of it still standing. I agree with this. This is true. These moments are also critical to a player's understanding of how to handle the hardest parts of the game. Don't deprive yourself the opportunity to learn through exposure. I think this is interesting. This is a very good point. He's essentially saying you learn more about the game the harder the game is, or the toughest moments, to be completely honest. I think he's trying to get at. Or maybe, regardless, I think they're on to something here where basically those tough situations are really when you know what you're capable of. So if you kind of rush through the bad moments, there are definitely some moments that I think are worth rushing through. It really depends, though. It depends on mortal wounds and zone thropes and spore mines. But ultimately, those hard moments when you see a big wave, just hop into the fight, there's really no reason you should just rush through that, because they're going to follow you unless you have like an elevator. But yeah, those type of moments are definitely when you know what you are capable of. When you jump into a fight with like 2 extremists, like I remember one time there was I forget what it was. I was just doing some leveling, and we got jumped on by 2, I think it was 1 Ravener and 1 Lictor, and it was like lethal or something, but I'm pretty sure I was like fully leveled. I really honestly forget the circumstance, but I know it was like me and my teammates. I think 1 teammate was respawning, but yeah, one Ravener ended up grabbing my other teammate who went down, and then I had a 2v1 a Lictor and a Ravener. But I was fine because I know their attack patterns, and I know how to parry them and stuff. And yeah, at the time it wasn't like absolute or anything like that, and it was actually a pretty stable point of the game. And once I got finished fighting the extremists, the guy was like, "Holy cow, that guy took on 2 extremists at once. That was crazy." It's like, that's pretty much where you want to be when you are in absolute. You know what I mean? Like, when you're going into absolute, you definitely want to be able to take out 2 extremists. If I just gave up there, then how would I know how to fight extremists? That's pretty much what this guy's, pointing at here. So this was a good comment. The ridiculous thing is, you can still move through missions quite fast if you clear things as a team. I happened upon a pickup group with a Vanguard and an Assault who were moving at a dang near sprint, while also murdering every last thing. I had a hard time keeping up as a heavy just because they were murdering stuff over there, and I needed to support from range. Still was the fastest I've ever moved through Inferno, and every last critter died. Was a good run. Dude, okay, this comment cracks me up. First of all, critter, wow. That is not the way I see Tyranids, but I mean, still funny. He has a fair point. Poor squirrels that are in the way of this Vanguard. Vanguard and Assault who are moving at dang near sprint while also taking out everything in sight. This is interesting. Vanguard and Assault players, I wonder what they were using. But no, I understand what they're getting at here. You're honestly better off just taking out everything you see that's in your way. Backtracking is where it gets a little fishy for me when it comes to, pacing in absolute operations. Sometimes it's like, do you really want to go back for something that we're going to be able to get as soon as we get off this elevator. You know what I mean? Those type of moments are where it can kind of get a little sticky in absolute, because then you just spawn extremists. It's honestly, I feel like this person's onto something as well. I do think in most moments you're better off just fighting whatever's there and then moving on with the operation. The quicker you take out things, the quicker you move through the operation. Yep, there's probably less moments you need to rush through the operation and just like skip fights than there are moments where you're just better off fighting. 100%. I think that's a fair point. Now, that said, there's definitely moments where, you know, you gotta be really keen with the details. You gotta keep track of mortal wounds. Gotta make sure that, you know, everyone has grenade stims, whatever. All of that goes a far way, because if everyone's stocked up with items, then you're really not going to gain much by backtracking and just hitting a crate or something. But yeah, definitely, I think this comment, yeah, they're on the right track here. It is faster, just taking out things faster. You know what I mean? Where do you draw the line between helping and helping too much? Being able to beat 6 majors is an important skill to learn. Okay, this is, wow, that's interesting. I mean, there's no reason why you can't just help out your teammate in, you know, surrounding situations, because they can always just they can always just get really bad out of nowhere. And not to mention, yeah, trying to clear things out fast before spore mines or other extremists spawn is important. So I would not recommend just looking at your teammate try to fight 6 majors. You know, they ultimately, if you jump in, it's still 3v2, right? So you can still, you know, stack on top of that. And then at a certain moment, you know, this assault player is going to actually search out those moments, and then hopefully you won't need to jump in regardless. So I feel like, yeah, the moment is definitely there. If it's there. If you have a time to help out your teammate and he's in front of you in your vicinity, fair. Or if you have to help out your teammate to progress the operation, also fair. However, the original poster actually has an interesting response to this. So yeah, let's definitely see what they have to say about this question. And honestly, this is a pretty good question for you guys as well. Like, where honestly do you draw the line between helping and helping too much? Or like, where do you draw the line of when you need to progress the operation compared to when you need to kind of scope out and pick up items? Yes, it's important to have the skill to be able to 1v6, but that's not the point here, though. My man is already struggling. If no one intervened, he'll either drop down and need revive, or come out of it with super low health. Yeah, that's a fair point, actually, about... first of all, obviously going down is bad, mortal wound, but what he's talking about with the low health here, I feel like is pretty important also, because that means he's using a stim. That means one less extra stim that you could use for later. So yeah, ultimately you're just better off jumping into that fight. Neither of these situations is preferable. Unless your argument is, if dude can't 1v6, he should just die. That's no way to learn either. No, it's not. That's not really, I don't think that's what people are getting at. I think people are trying to just get to the point where they do need to be able to take care of themselves in higher difficulties when you get there. This was lethal, I believe, in Inferno. So, and honestly, he's playing a class that, depending on what his build is, can definitely get swarmed in a rough situation. We were talking about the assault player who got surrounded by, you know, 6 majors. And also it depends on what the majors were. Are they spore mine majors? You know what I mean? If they're bone swords, then I feel like, yeah, you should be fine for the most part, but it really depends. But if he's getting, like, swarmed by, like, vine mines and, like, there's multiple snipers there, it could be kind of a rough situation. But yeah, ultimately, you should still be able to handle your own in lethal. You shouldn't really need people to come back and help you, but teamwork is also very important. Plus, before this, I was busy fighting my own fight at Generator 2. Oh, wow, this sounds like they had a rough time clearing out these generators. So for all we know, that assault probably started out 1v10 since the heavy is doing nothing. Yeah, I mean... this is unfortunate. I'm not too sure what the heavy was doing in this operation. I feel like a lot of this stuff clearly started to be a breakdown in teamwork. So there's clearly it's either the one player isn't doing enough to take out enemies. You know what? I'll give it to the assault player regardless, because they're on objective, right? if the heavy wasn't on objective, which I think the original poster is alluding to here, then yeah, the breakdown in teamwork is the fact that the heavy isn't playing the objective in the operation, and that's how you progress. So ultimately, even though the heavy is rushing, it's actually taking them longer to get through this operation because because now their teammates are backtracking because they gotta help the assault get out of a sticky generator situation that he shouldn't even be in because the heavy's not playing the objective. So yeah, if the heavy just played the objective, potentially they're getting out of this part of the operation quicker. So that yeah, nah, honestly, yeah, that's correct. And this is definitely something that probably happened, considering the fact that the heavy is already not really, very interested in keeping up teamwork. Why would he be interested on how his teammates felt trying to rush them through the operation? You know what I mean? I don't know. Especially in Inferno, it's like, dude, you don't have to point to me where to go in Inferno. Like, I know where I'm going at that point. No, well, Inferno and and lethal difficulty also for any other operation. You know what I mean? So, like, honestly, if you're in lethal or absolute or even ruthless, you should know where you're going. Okay, I'm glad we got to the bottom of this. I do really hope this commenter is like on point with this, but judging by the details and what we were able to break down here, I do think, yeah, clearly they were struggling on generator 3 or one of these generators, and then it just started to snowball from there, and maybe the heavy should have been more on these generators. This is kind of interesting. I kind of like the way we were able to find this situation and really figure out what was like what can apply to us. And I will say this does feel like an interesting conversation to have, but ultimately, this heavy should have been on the objectives and playing with his team. And then, hey, you won't actually have to have the conversation of, are we rushing through or, are we taking too long? Like, when is the right time to rush through an operation? You know what I mean? So, yeah, ultimately, this is a question to you guys. If you have been in a situation like this, how did you handle this? And thanks for watching.